तो सुनो।
ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वापरान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सागणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितंश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते कुपेश गोपिका कान्ता राधा कान्त नमोऽस्तु ते। तप्त कांचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमः विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामी निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवारि पाश्चात्य ऋषतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरि बोल। Okay, so today we start a new chapter, and the chapter number is 12. Subject matter, devotional service. Very nice chapter. Okay, text number 1. Arjuna Vacha Evam Satata Yukta Ye Bhaktastvam Paryupashate Cha Ye Chapyaksharam Avyaktam Desham Ke Yoga Vittama. Arjuna Vacha, Arjuna said, Evam Das Satata, always Yuktaha, engaged. Ye, those, Bhaktaha, devotees, Tvam, unto you, Paryupasate, properly worship. Ye, those, Cha, also. Api, again, Aksharam, beyond the senses. Avyaktam, unmanifested. Tesham, of them. Ke, who, Yoga Vittamaha, the most perfect. Translation. Arjuna inquired, which is considered to be more perfect? Those who are properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahma, the unmanifested? Purport. Krishna has now explained about the personal, the impersonal, and the universal, and has described all kinds of devotees and yogis. Generally, the transcendentalist can be divided into two classes. One is the impersonalist, and the other is the personalist. The personalist devotee engages himself with all energy in the service of the Supreme Lord. The impersonalist engages himself not directly in the service of Krishna, but in meditation on the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested. We find in this chapter that of the different processes for self-realization of the absolute truth, Bhakti Yoga, devotional service is the highest. If one at all desires to have the association of the Supreme Person of Godhead, then he must take to devotional service. Those who worship the Supreme Lord directly by devotional service are called personalists. Those who engage themselves in meditation on the impersonal Brahman are called impersonalists. Arjuna here questioning which position is better. There are different ways to realize the absolute truth, but Krishna indicates in this chapter that Bhakti Yoga or devotional service to him is highest of all. It is said it is the most direct and it is the easiest means for association with Godhead. In the second chapter, the Lord explains that a living entity is not the material body, but is a spiritual spark as a part of this absolute truth. In the seventh chapter, he speaks of the living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme Whole and recommends that he transfer his attention fully to the whole. In the eighth chapter, it is stated that whoever thinks of Krishna at the moment of death is at once transferred to the spiritual sky, Krishna's abode. And at the end of the sixth chapter, the Lord says that out of all the yogis, He who thinks of Krishna within himself is considered to be the most perfect. So, throughout the Gita, personal devotion to Krishna is recommended as the highest form of spiritual realization. Yet there are those who are still attracted to Krishna's impersonal Brahmajyoti effulgence, which is the all-pervasive aspect of the absolute truth and which is unmanifested and beyond the reach of the senses. Arjuna would like to know which of these two types of transcendentalist is more perfect in knowledge. In other words, he is clarifying his own position because he is attached to the personal form of Krishna. He is not attached to the impersonal Brahman. He wants to know whether his position is secure. The impersonal manifestation, either in this material world or in the spiritual world of the Supreme Lord, is a problem for meditation. Actually, one cannot perfectly conceive of the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth. Therefore, Arjuna wants to say, what is the use of such waste of time? Arjuna experienced in the 11th chapter that to be attached to the personal form of Krishna is best because he could thus understand all other forms at the same time, and there was no disturbance to his love for Krishna. This important question asked of Krishna by Arjuna will clarify the distinction between the impersonal and personal conceptions of the Absolute Truth. Hare Krishna. Okay, who wants to read the next one?
May I, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please accept my obeisances of the Srila Prabhupada. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Mane Aveshya Mano Yemam Nitya Yukta Upasate Shraddhya Parayogitas Te Me Yukta Tma Mahatma Sri Bhagavan Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, may unto me aveshya, fixing manya, mind, a one who, mam unto me, nitya, always yukta, engaged, upasate, worships, shraddhaya, with faith, paraya, transcendental, pitha, engages they may me mine yukta ta maha most perfection mata I consider. Translation: the Supreme Personality of God is said, he whose mind is fixed on my personal form, always engaged in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith, is considered to me to be most perfect. Purport. In answer to Arjuna's question, Krishna clearly says that he, he who concentrates upon his personal form and who worships him with faith and devotion is to be considered most perfect in yoga. For when he such Krishna consciousness, there are no material activities because everything is done by Krishna. A pure devotee is constantly engaged. Sometimes he chants, sometimes he hears or reads books about Krishna, or sometimes he cooks prasadam or goes to the market to purchase something for Krishna. Or sometimes he washes the temple or the dishes. Whatever he does not let a single moment pass without devoting his activity to Krishna. Such devotion is in full samadhi. Second, 30, text 3 to 4. Ye tve aksaram anirdeshyam avyaktam पर्युपासते सर्वत्रागम अचिन्त्यम च युक्तस्तम अच्छलम द्रोहम संयम येन्द्रिया कर्मम सर्वत्र उद्यया ते पर पुन्वती माम eva sarvabhuta ite ratha. Yes, those two, but aksaram, which is behind the perfection of the senses, anin, andriyam, andrisyam, indefinite, avyaktam, unmanifested, paryu, pasate, completely engages, sarvatra, sarvatragam, all prevailing, anchit, anchintyam, inconceivable, cha also, kutastam, in the center, achalam, immovable, dhruvam, fixed, saniyam, yeah, controlling, gar, indriya, karmam, karma, all the senses, sarvatra, everywhere, sama, buddhya, equally disposed, they, parpanvati, achieve, mam unto me, eva, certainly, sarva, bhuta, ite, all living entities, welfare, ratha, engaged. Translation, but those who fully worship the unmanifested, that which lies behind the perfect perception, behind the perception of the senses, the all prevailing, inconceivable, fixed, and immovable, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth by controlling the various senses and being equally disposed to everyone, such persons engaged in the welfare of all at last achieve me. Purport. Those who do not directly worship the Supreme Lord, Supreme Godhead, Krishna, but who attempt to achieve the same goal by an indirect process, also ultimately achieve the supreme goal, Sri Krishna, as is stated, after many births, the man of wisdom seeks refuge in me, knowing Vasudeva is all. When a person comes to full knowledge after many births, he surrenders unto Lord Krishna. If one approaches the Godhead by the method mentioned in this verse, he has to control the senses, render service to everyone, and engage in the welfare of all beings. It is inferred that one has to approach Lord Krishna, otherwise there is no perfect realization. Often there is much penances involved before one fully surrenders unto him. In order to perceive the super soul within the individual soul, one has to cease the sensual activities of seeing, hearing, tasting, working, etc. Then one comes to understand that the Supreme Soul is present everywhere, realizing it is one envies no living entity. He sees no difference between man and animal because he sees soul only, not the outer covering. But for the common man, this method of impersonal realization is very difficult. May I continue, bro? One more.
Does anyone want to read? If no one wants to read, then you can continue, bro.
Okay.
I can read the next one. You can read this. If we read more.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
क्लेशोऽधिकत्रास्तेषम् अव्यक्तसत्तचेतसम् अव्यक्ता हि कृतिर्दुःखं देवद्भिरव्यप्यते क्लेश्य trouble अधिकतरा more troublesome, some of them avyakta, unmanifested, asatha, being attached, chetasam, of those whose minds, avyakta, unmanifested, he, certainly, gati bhakti dukham, progress in troublesome, deva bihi, of the embodiments of avapyate, achieve. Translation: for those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested impersonal future of the Supreme, advancement in very troublesome to make progress in that desire that in that disciple line is always discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. The group of transcendentalists who follow the path of the inconceivable, unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord are called Jnana Yogis, and persons who are in full Krishna consciousness engaged in devotion service to the Lord are called Bhakti Yogis. Now, here the difference between Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga is definitely expressed. The process of Jnana Yoga, although ultimately bringing one to the same goal, is very troublesome, whereas the path of Bhakti Yoga, the progress of being in direct service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is easier and is natural for the embodied soul. The individual soul is embodied since time immemorial. It is very difficult for him to simply theoretically understand that he is not the body. Therefore, the Bhakti Yoga accepts the deity of Krishna as worshipable because there is some bodily conception fixed in the mind, which can thus be applied. Of course, worship of the Supreme Personality of God is in his form within the temple is not ideal worship. There is evidence in the Vedic literature that the worship may be Sarguna and Nirguna of the Supreme possessing or not possessing attributes. Worship of the deity in the temple is Saguna worship. For the Lord, he is represented by material qualities, but the form of the Lord, though represented by material qualities, such as stone, wood, or oil, paints, is not actually material. That is the absolute nature of the Supreme Lord. A curved example may be given here. We may find some mailboxes on the street, and if we post our letters in those boxes, they will naturally go to their destination without difficulty. But any old box or an imitation which we may find somewhere which is not authorized by the post office will not do the work. Similarly, God has an unauthorized representation in the deity form which is called Acha, Archa Vigraha. This Archa Vigraha is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. God will accept service through that form. The Lord is omnipotent and all powerful. Therefore, by his incarnation as Archa Vigraha, he can accept the service of the devotee just to make it convenient for the man in conditioned life. So, for a devotee, there is no difficulty in approaching the Supreme immediately and directly. But for those who are following the impersonal way to the spiritual realization, the path is difficult. They have to understand and unmanifested representation of the Supreme through such Vedic literatures as the Upanishads, and they have to learn the language, understand the non-perpetual feelings, and they have to realize all these processes. This is not very easy for a common man. A person in Krishna consciousness engaged in devotion service simply by the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, simply by offering regulative obeisances unto the deity, simply by hearing the glorifies of the Lord, and simply by eating the remnants of foodstuffs offered to the Lord, realize the Supreme doubt that the impersonalists are unnecessarily taking a troublesome path with the risk of not realizing the absolute truth at the ultimate end. But the personalist without of any risk, trouble, or difficulty approaches the supreme personality directly. A similar passage appears in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is stated here there that if one has to ultimately surrender onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this surrendering process is called bhakti, but instead it takes the trouble to understand what is Brahman and what is not Brahman, and spends his whole life in that way. The result is simply troublesome. Therefore, it is advised here that one should not take up this troublesome path of self-realization because there is uncertainty in the ultimate result. A living entity is eternally an individual soul, and if he wants to merge into the spiritual whole, he may accomplish the realization of the internal and knowledgeable aspects of his original nature. But the blissful portion is not realized by the grace of some devotee. Such a transcendentalist, highly learned in the process of Jnana Yoga, may come to the point of Bhakti Yoga or devotion service. At the time, long practice in impersonalism also becomes a source of trouble because he cannot give up the idea. Therefore, an embodied soul is always in difficulty with the unmanifested both at the time of practice and at the time of realization. Every living soul is partially independent, and one should know for certain that this unmanifested realization is against the nature of his spiritual blissful life. One should not take up this process for every individual living entity. The process of Krishna consciousness, which entails full engagement in devotion service, is the best way. If one wants to ignore this devotion service, there is the danger of turning to atheism. This process of centering attention on the unmanifested, the inconceivable, which is behind the approach of the senses, as already expressed in this verse, should never be encouraged at any time, especially in this age. It is not advised by Lord Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Okay, Arab Prabhu, your turn.
ये तु सर्वाणि कर्माणि मयि सन्न्यस्य मत्पराः अनन्येनैव योगेन मां ध्यायन्त उपासते तेषाम् अहं समुद्धर्ता मृत्युसंसारसागरात् पावामि न चिरात् पार्थ maya veshita chetasam. Yea, one who took path sarvani, everything, karmani, activities, maji, unto me, sanyasya, giving up, matparaha, being attached to me, ananyena, without division, eva, certainly, yogena, by practice of such bhakti yoga, mam, unto me, jayantaha, meditating, upasate, worship tesham, of them, aham, I, samudartha, deliverer, mrityu, that, samsara, material existence, sagarat, from the ocean, pavami, become, nachirat, not a long time, partha, O son of Partha, maji, unto me, aveshita, fixed, chetasam, of those whose minds are like that, whose translation. For one who worships me, giving up all his activities unto me and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service and always meditating upon me, who has fixed his mind upon me, O son of Pritha, Partha, For him I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. Purport. It is explicitly stated here that the devotees are very fortunate to be delivered very soon from material existence by the Lord. In pure devotional service, one comes to the realization that God is great and that the individual soul is subordinate to Him. His duty is to render service to the Lord. If not, then he will render service to Maya. As stated before, the Supreme Lord can only be appreciated by devotional service. Therefore, one should be fully devoted. One should fix his mind fully on Krishna in order to achieve Him. One should work only for Krishna. It does not matter in what kind of work one engages, but that work should be done only for Krishna. That is the standard of devotional service. The devotee does not desire any achievement other than pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His life's mission is to please Krishna, and he can sacrifice everything for Krishna's satisfaction, just as Arjuna did in the battle of Kurukshetra. The process is very simple. One can devote himself in his occupation and engage at the same time in chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Such transcendental chanting attracts the devotee to the personality of Godhead. The Supreme Lord herein promises that he will without delay deliver a pure devotee thus engaged from the ocean of material existence. Without delay, deliver. Oh, yes. Those who are advanced in yoga practice can willfully transfer the soul to whatever planet they like by the yoga process, and others take the opportunity in various ways. But as far as the devotee is concerned, it is clearly stated here that the Lord Himself takes him. He does not need to wait to become very experienced in order to transfer himself to the spiritual sky. In the Varaha Purana, this verse appears. Nayami paramam sthanam archiradi katim vina garuda skandam aropya yate cham anivarita. The purport of this verse is that the devotee does not need to practice Ashtanga yoga in order to transfer his soul to the spiritual planet. The responsibility is taken by the Supreme Lord Himself. He clearly states here that He Himself becomes the deliverer. The child is completely cared for by his parents, and thus his position is secure. Similarly, a devotee does not need to endeavor to transfer himself by yoga practice to other planets. Rather, the Supreme Lord, by his great mercy, comes at once, riding on his bird carrier Garuda, and at once delivers the devotee from this material existence. Although a man who has fallen in the ocean may struggle very hard and may be very expert in swimming, he cannot save himself. But if someone comes and picks him up from the water, then he is easily rescued. Similarly, the Lord picks up the devotee from this material existence. One simply has to practice the easy process of Krishna consciousness and fully engage himself in devotional service. Any intelligent man should always prefer the process of devotional service to all other paths. The Narayaniya, this is confirmed as follows. Ya vai sadhana sampatti purushartha chatushtaye taya vina tad apnoti naro narayanashraya. The purport of this verse is that one should not engage in the different processes of fruitive activity or cultivate knowledge by the mental speculation. Mental speculative process. One who is devoted to the Supreme Personality can attain all the benefits derived from other yogic processes, speculation, rituals, sacrifices, charities, etc. That is the specific benediction of devotional service. Simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The devotee of the Lord can approach the supreme destination easily and happily, but this destination cannot be approached by any other process of religion. The conclusion of Bhagavad Gita is stated in the 18th chapter. Sarva dharman parityakshya mam ekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami mas shutsaha. One should give up all other processes of self-realization, simply execute devotional service in Krishna consciousness that will enable one to reach the highest perfection of life. There is no need for one to consider the sinful actions of his past life because the Supreme Lord fully takes charge of him. Therefore, one should not futilely try to deliver himself in spiritual realization. Futilely try to deliver. Let everyone take shelter of the Supreme Omnipotent Godhead Krishna. That is the highest perfection of life. No need for one to consider sinful actions of past life. Do I still read? Did I read only one?
Yes, Prabhu, read this next one also.
Okay, yes, thank you. Mayeva mana athasva mayi buddhim niveshaya nivasishyasi mayeva ata urdvam nasam saya. Mayi unto me eva certainly manaha mind athasva fix mayi upon me buddhim intelligence niveshaya apply nivasishyasi you lead Maji unto me eva certainly ataha therefore urdvam up now never samsaya doubt. I'm sorry. Translation. Just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always, without a doubt. Purport. One who is engaged in Lord Krishna's devotional service lives in a direct relationship with the Supreme Lord, so there is no doubt that his position is transcendental from the very beginning. A devotee does not live on the material plane, he lives in Krishna. The holy name of the Lord and the Lord are non-different. Therefore, when a devotee chants Hare Krishna, Krishna and his internal potency are dancing on the tongue of the devotee. When he offers Krishna food, Krishna directly accepts these eatables and the devotee becomes Krishnazed by eating the remnants. One who does not engage in such service cannot understand how this is so, although this is a process recommended in the Gita and in other Vedic literatures. Thank you, Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Very well. Thank you so much, Prabhu. अथ चित्तं समादातुं न शक्नोषि मयि स्थिरम् अभ्यासयोगेन ततो मामिच्छाप्तुं धनञ्जय. अथ if therefore chittam mind samadatam fixing na not saknoshi able mayi upon me stiram fixed abhyasa practice yogena by devotional service tataha therefore me itcha desire aptum to get dhananjaya o Arjuna. Translation. My dear Arjuna, O winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulated principles of Bhakti Yoga. In this way, you will develop a desire to attain to me. Purport. In this verse, two different processes of Bhakti Yoga are indicated. The first applies to one who has actually developed an attachment for Krishna. The Supreme Person of Godhead by transcendental love, and the other is for one who has not developed an attachment for the Supreme Person by transcendental love. For this second class, there are different prescribed rules and regulations which one can follow to be ultimately elevated to the stage of attachment to Krishna. Bhakti Yoga is the purification of the senses. At the present moment in material existence, the senses are always impure, being engaged in sense gratification. But by the practice of Bhakti Yoga, these senses can become purified. And in the purified state, they come directly in contact with the Supreme Lord. In this material existence, I may be engaged in some service to some master, but I don't really lovingly serve my master. I simply serve to get some money. And the master also is not in love. He takes service from me and pays me. So there is no question of love, but for spiritual life one must be elevated to the pure stage of love. That stage of love can be achieved by practice of devotional service performed with the present senses. This love of God is now in a dormant state in everyone's heart, and their love of God is manifested in different ways, but it is contaminated by the material association. Now the material association has to be purified, and that dormant natural love for Krishna has to be revived. That is the whole process. To practice the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga, one should under the guidance of an expert spiritual master, follow certain principles. One should rise early in the morning, take baths, enter the temple, and offer prayers and chant Hare Krishna, then collect flowers to offer to the deity, cook foodstuffs to offer to the deity, take prasadam, and so on. There are various rules and regulations which one should follow, and one should constantly hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam from pure devotees. This practice can help anyone to rise to the level of love of God, and then he is sure of his progress into the spiritual kingdom of God. This practice of Bhakti Yoga under the rules and regulations with the direction of a spiritual master will surely bring one to the stage of love of God. Abhyase. Oh, Haribol. Jenny Prabhu, can you read that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Haribol.
Abhyasepi asarma tushi matkarma paramo bhava maddartam api karmani kurvam siddhim avapsyapsi. Abhyase, in the practice of api even asamartaha, unable, asi you are, matkarma, my work, palamaha, supreme, bhava, you become, mattartam, for my sake, api, even though, karmani, what, kurvam, performing, siddhim, perfection, avapsyasi, achieve. Translation: if you cannot practice the regulation of Bhakti Yoga, then just try to work for me, because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. Purport: one who is not able even to practice the regulative principle of Bhakti Yoga under the guidance of a spiritual master can still be drawn to this perfectional stage by working for the Supreme Lord. How to do this work has already been explained in the 55th verse of 11 chapters. One should be sympathetic to the propagation of Krishna consciousness. There are many devotees who are engaged in the propagation of Krishna consciousness, and they require help. So even if one cannot directly practice the regulate principle of Bhakti Yoga, he can try to help such work. Every endeavor requires land, capital, organization, and labor. Just as in business, one requires a place to stay, some capital to use, some labor, and some organization to expand. So the same is required in the service of Krishna. The only difference is that in materialism, one works for sense gratification. The same work, however, can be performed for the satisfaction of Krishna, and that is spiritual activity. If one has sufficient money, he can help in building an office or temple for propagating Krishna consciousness, or he can help with publication. There are various fields of activity, and one should be interested in such activities. If one cannot sacrifice the result of such activities, the same person can still sacrifice some percentage to propagate Krishna consciousness. This voluntary service to the cause of Krishna consciousness will help one to rise to a higher state of love for God, whereupon one becomes perfect.
Haribol. Okay, Prabhu, one more. Then we can go 6 as the compare.
Thank you very much. Taitadapi ashaktoshi kartuma yogam ashritaha sarvam karma palam tyagam tataha kulu yatatmavam atah evento etat this happy also ashaktaha unable see you are kartum to perform mat unto me yogam devotional service ashritaha refuge salvakarma all activities Fala result tyagam for renunciation tataha therefore kulu do yata atmavan self-situated. Translation: if however, you are unable to work in this consciousness, then try to act giving up all results of your work and try to be self-situated. Purport. It may be that one is unable to even sympathize with the activities of Krishna consciousness because of social, familial, or religious consideration, or because of some other impediments. If one attaches himself directly to the activities of Krishna consciousness, there may be objection from family members or so many other difficulties. For one who has such a problem, it is advised that he sacrifice the accumulated result of his activities to some good cause. Such procedures are described in the Vedic rules. There are many descriptions of sacrifice and special function of the pumumdi or special works in which the result of one's previous action may be applied. Thus, one may gradually become elevated to the state of knowledge. It is also found that when one who is not even interested in the activities of Krishna consciousness gives charity to some hospital or some other social institution, he gives up the hard-earned result of his activities. That is also recommended here because by the practice of giving up the fruits of one activities, one is sure to purify his mind gradually. And in that purified stage of mind, one becomes able to understand Krishna consciousness. Of course, Krishna consciousness is not dependent on any other experience because Krishna consciousness itself can purify one's mind. But if there are impediments to Krishna consciousness, one may try to give up the result of his action. In that respect, social service, community service, national service, sacrifice for one's country, etc., may be accepted so that someday one may come to the stage of pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord. In Bhagavad Gita, we find it is stated, Yata pravitir putanam. If one decide to sacrifice for the supreme cause, even if he does not know that the supreme cause is Krishna, he will come gradually to understand that Krishna is the supreme cause by the sacrificial method. Thank you very much. Haribo.
Oh, thank you so much, Prabhu. Okay, now let's read 6 of the prayers. चेतो दर्पणमार्जनं भवमहादावाग्निर्वापनं श्रेयः कैरवचन्द्रिका वितरणं विद्यावादूजीवनम् आनन्दं बुद्धिवर्धनं प्रतिपदं पूर्णामृतस्वादनं सर्वात्मा स्नपनं परं विजयते श्रीकृष्णसङ्कीर्तनम्
Nam nam kari bahudani jasalva shaktis tatra pitani amitas malanena kalaham. Ittadrishi tava klipa bhagavan mamapi dudaiva midrisham miha janinanulagaham.
तृणादपि सुनीचेन तरोरपि सहिष्णुन् अमानिना मानदेन कीर्तनीय सदा हरि
नटनं नचनं न सुन्दरीं कवितां वा जगदीशकामये मम जन्मनि जन्मनीश्वरे भवतात् भक्तिरहैतुकी त्वयि
ऐनन्दतनुजा
Ainandanat.
yes Prabhu.
Continue, Ganesh, please. Continue, Ganesh.
Right, Haribol.
ऐनन्दनतनुजकिङ्करं पतितं मां मे भवं उदौ कृपौ कृपया तव पादपङ्कजा चित्तधूलिसदृशं विचिन्तया.
नयनं गलदश्रुधारया वदनं गद्गदारुद्धया गिरा पुलकर्निचितं वपुः कदा तव नाम गृहणे भविष्यति
युगायितं निमेषेण चक्षुषा प्रविचायितं शून्यायितं जगत् सर्वं Govinda Virahena me.
Ashlishyava padalatam pinashtumam hardashanam almahatam kalutuvam yata tatava vidatatulam patumat plananatastu saivana palaham.
Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious.
O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benedictions to the living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energy. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. And, O my Lord, out of kindness, you are enabled us to easily approach you by your holy name, but I am not so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them.
One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly.
O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cosmic devotional service, birth after birth.
O son of Maharajananda, Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet.
O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at recitation of your name?
O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all weakened in the world in your absence.
I know no one but Krishna has my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my merciful Lord unconditionally.
Haribol, Sri Successam Ki Jai.
Jai.
The 10 offenses to the holy name. First offense, to blaspheme the devotees who had dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord.
Second offense, to consider the name of demigod Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu.
Third offense, to disobey the orders of the spiritual master.
4. To blaspheme the Vedic scriptures or scriptures in pursuance to the Vedic person.
To consider 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be an imagination.
6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord.
7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of the holy name.
8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in the Vedas as fruitive activities, karma kanda.
9. To instruct a faithless person about the glories of the holy name.
10. To not have complete faith in the chanting of the holy name and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must guard against these offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. Pancha kalpatarubhya
Go. Vanchakalpatarvishya Vasudevasya Pachitana
Namo
Pavanebhyo Namo Namah.
Namo Namaha. Panchatattva ki jai, Nityananda Prabhu ki jai, Sri
Jai.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu
Jai.
ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
jai, Gaura Premanande, Hari
Jai.
Hari Bo.
Hari Hari
Hari
Bol.
Hari Bol.